Welcome to the November 2025 edition of Business and Policy News, brought to you by the Farm Advisory Service. This newsletter helps you to scan your horizons, prepare for industry changes, and keeps you abreast of the latest research and policy updates. Along with our regular monthly updates on policy, arable, beef, sheep, and milk. In this edition, we will also be looking at where dairy technology can benefit your business. Hello. My name is Christine Beaton, and I am the editor of this publication. First up, we have this month's news. Stormy times ahead. The Scottish Government's first estimates of this year's cereal and oilseed rape harvest has initially reported that the total cereal production for 2025 could reach a high of over 3.2 million tonnes, well above the 5-year average. However, the outlook is less positive for spring crops, where the effects of drought, following the sunniest spring and the hottest summer on record, have impacted on yield and crop quality. Coupled with this, the oats and malting barley sectors are both struggling with weak consumption and heavy supply, which will significantly impact on crop margins this year. Current demographics are having an effect on demand for cereals, with young consumers looking for high-protein foods, coupled with a lower appetite for alcohol compared to older generations. The UK dairy sector has experienced a period of record milk prices driven by strong demand and favourable market conditions, with rising milk production not just in the UK but across Europe. However, with falling demand for dairy commodities, UK milk processors have announced sudden and sharp price cuts, with some as high as 8 pence per litre, leaving many dairy farmers reeling. Others have been dealt a major and potentially career-ending blow, being told that their milk contract is being terminated. With many dairy farmers south of the border struggling with winter fodder supplies, previous positivity in the sector is rapidly diminishing. Following new outbreaks of avian flu at the end of October in Cumbria, Denbighshire and North Yorkshire, affecting 132,000 birds, affected sites have been placed under a 3-kilometre protection zone and a 10-kilometre surveillance zone, in addition to which 20 English counties stretching from the Scottish borders downwards have been instructed to house all flocks with greater than 50 birds or any flock where the business sells or gives away eggs, poultry products or live birds. Across the whole of Great Britain, poultry producers are advised to remain vigilant and to report any suspicion of disease promptly to their local Animal and Plant Health Agency office. While it has been reported by the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, that this year the UK is set to be the second fastest growing nation of the world's most advanced economies, with a predicted growth rate of 1.3%, the IMF also predicts that the UK will face the highest rate of inflation among G7 nations both this year and next. The IMF predicts that prices will rise by an average of 3.4% this year and by 2.5% next year, driven by rising energy and utility bills. With the UK annual inflation rate continuing at 3.8% for the third month in a row, opinion is tipped towards the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee keeping its bank base rate at 4% when it meets on Thursday the 6th of November. Speculators are now anticipating the bank's next interest rate cut could be in early February next year. Further afield, while the average inflation rate in the European Union is currently 2.6%, France's inflation rate is only 1.2%, despite its relatively turbulent political climate linked to past and present prime ministers and presidents. However, maybe lessons could be learned from Finland and Cyprus, with inflation rates of 0.5% and minus 0.7% respectively. Before we move on to what is in this month's edition of Business and Policy News, on a lighter note, a Belgian business has developed a process to make a coffee alternative from peas and chickpeas. Coffee, founded in 2022, uses a patent-pending fermentation and roasting process to turn legumes into coffee beans, a product that is ground and brewed like coffee. This sustainability innovation taps into global efforts to cut agricultural emissions, offering 70% lower CO2 output than regular coffee while using 90% less water. Now, the question is, if franchised, could the environmental benefits be doubled by growing coffee on EFA land. In this month's edition of Business and Policy News, in addition to our regular updates on arable, beef, sheep and dairy, our policy article provides an overview of upcoming environmental legislation and an update on the Future Farming Investment Scheme, the Muirburn Licensing Scheme, funding for new woodlands and the use of rodenticides. And in our specialist article, Dr. Lorna McPherson highlights where embracing new technology could help dairy businesses in terms of herd health, cow management and overall profitability. Let's take a look at this month's policy briefs. An update on the Future Farming Investment Scheme. The Scottish Government has announced an additional £7 million of funding for the new Future Farming Investment Scheme, FFIS, increasing the total grant funding available to £21.4 million, with priority support for new entrants, young farmers, small farms and tenant farmers. FFIS was launched in July to offer flexible capital grants to support investments in efficiency, nature and climate-friendly farming. A total of 7,584 applications were received by the scheme deadline on the 22nd of August. From the 31st of October, successful applicants were notified by email with a link to log on to MAC, the Scottish Government's Manage Applications and Claims Service, allowing them to view and accept the offer of grant. Successful applicants have 14 days to accept the terms of the award, with payments being made within 30 days. If you've applied but haven't had an email, please check your email junk box so that you do not miss out on the offer of a grant. Agri-Environment Climate Scheme Update. It is viewed that the Agri-Environment Climate Scheme, EECS, continues to deliver significant benefits for farmers and crofters and for our environment. The Scottish Government have decided to extend the scheme to at least 2030. EECS was launched in 2015 to promote land management practices which protect and enhance Scotland's natural heritage, improve water quality, manage flood risk, and mitigate and adapt to climate change. To date, 3,417 businesses have been awarded a total of £339 million to fund a range of activities that help to maintain and enhance Scotland's rich and varied natural environment. The 2026 round of the scheme will open for applications in early 2026, with details to be confirmed later this year. Results from the June Agricultural Census 2025 show the continued long-term trend in declining cattle numbers in Scotland, down 2.6% over a 5-year average to 1.65 million cattle. However, while the decrease was mainly due to fewer female beef cattle, the number of female dairy cows increased. Other livestock results show that there were 6.54 million sheep in 2025, 2.2% less than the 5-year average, but 1.1% more than in 2024. The total number of poultry increased to 12.42 million, and the number of pigs fell to 312,300, 7.3% less than the 5-year average. In terms of cropping, while the area used to grow wheat increased by 5.4%, the area sown out with spring cereals decreased by 0.5% when compared with the 5-year average, and the area planted with potatoes reached its highest level since 2011, with a total of 30,400 hectares being grown. The agricultural census also found that the number of people working on agricultural holdings in Scotland in 2025 fell by 600 to 66,800. An update on rodenticides. From the 1st of January 2026, anyone using professional use rodenticides must provide proof of certification at the point of purchase. Please note that a membership of a farm assurance scheme will no longer be valid. This new regulation applies to all farmers, crofters, growers, estate managers and rural workers. If you rely on rodenticides to manage rats or mice in farm buildings and grain stores, from the 1st of January 2026, legally you will not be able to buy or use professional rodenticides unless you can present one of two things at the point of purchase: A copy of your Campaign for Responsible Rodenticide Use CRRU training certificate awarded within the last 5 years, or a CRRU approved certificate that is older than 5 years, plus proof of current membership of a CRRU UK approved continuing professional development scheme, such as Basis Prompt, or that you are a British Pest Control Association BPCA registered. If you don't have a training certificate and want to get certified, or if your training certificate is greater than 5 years old and you want to get recertified, you can either attend an in-person training course, which gives you the opportunity to ask questions before you sit the assessment, or, for more flexibility, you can opt to do a Lantra e-learning online course and sit the assessment at home. Both versions of the course include a one-day training course, a final exam, and a certificate which will then be valid for 5 years. For further information, please see the show notes for all the relevant links. Muirburn Licensing Scheme Update. While we reported in the October edition of Business and Policy News that the Wildlife Management and Muirburn Scotland Bill would not start until the 1st of January 2026, the Scottish Government has since announced that the implementation of this legislation will now not come into force until autumn 2026. The reasoning for which being linked to the aftermath of the wildfires which have affected many parts of the country this year and the resulting extensive damage to Scotland's peatlands. For further information, please see the link in the show notes. Moving on to an update on rural support. Under the Draft Rural Support Regulations 2025, with regards to ecological focus areas and the Scottish Suckler Beef Support Scheme, it is being legislated that, for ecological focus areas, from the 1st of January 2027, the percentage of a holding that is to be maintained as an ecological focus area will increase from 5% to 7%. 4 new options for ecological focus areas, together with associated conversion and weighting factors, will be introduced. Regulation 2.3 sets out the conversion and weighting factors which apply to the new EFA options. Additional crop species will be added to the lists of green cover and nitrogen-fixing crops. Field margins will be increased from a minimum of 1 metre to 3 metres. Green cover crop establishment dates will be amended. The exemption from the requirement to maintain ecological focus areas for holdings with more than 75% arable land used for the production of grasses, land lying fallow, or the cultivation of leguminous crops, or where more than 75% of the eligible agricultural area is permanent grassland, will be removed. While the requirement to submit an EFA map will be removed, businesses must have one available if requested for inspection purposes. The map must have been prepared not more than 1 year before the start of the claim year to which it relates. The requirement to have a fertiliser and lime management plan will be removed. The restriction on harvesting areas under catch crops prior to the 31st of December will be removed. The restriction on harvesting areas under green cover prior to the 31st of December will also be removed. Moving on to the Scottish Suckler Beef Support Scheme. The application window for Suckler Beef Support Scheme payments will be extended up to and including the 14th of January following the end of the relevant calendar year. There will be a derogation for applicants claiming 10 or fewer calves in a scheme year. Where the derogation applies, the claimed calves will not be required to either be the firstborn of their mother or born within 410 days of the mother's previous qualifying calf. All other eligibility criteria specified in paragraph 3 will continue to apply. The new regulations will come into force on the 31st of December 2025, apart from those provisions relating to the Scottish Suckler Beef Support Scheme derogation from the eligibility calving interval conditionality requirement for applicants claiming 10 or fewer calves in a scheme year. This will come into force on the 1st of January 2026 for the 2026 scheme year. And to conclude our policy brief, good news for small-scale woodlands. An additional £1 million in forestry grants to help farmers, crofters and communities create and manage small woodlands across Scotland has been announced. The new package of Enhanced Forestry Grant Scheme funding aims to encourage small-scale woodland creation projects of up to 20 hectares. Support for these smaller woodland schemes is being raised by an average of 15% across Scotland and by 30% within the Central Scotland Green Network area. The increase in funding will help cover some of the inflationary pressures that farming and crofting communities have been facing when growing new woodlands. Extra funding will also go towards helping communities plan and kickstart the management of their own woodlands. The new package of enhanced grants for small woodlands includes an extra £750 per hectare for the first 20 hectares of new woodlands across Scotland, an increase of £1,750 per hectare in the Central Scotland Green Network area to encourage woodland creation near towns and cities. In the northern Western Islands, where deer management is a challenge, deer fencing and stock fencing grants will be doubled. And finally, up to £10,000 will be offered to help community-led woodland management schemes to develop. For further information, please click the link in the show notes. To conclude this month's policy briefs, we have two key dates to note. Greening cover must have been established by the 1st of November 2025, and the Scottish Upland Sheep Support Scheme application window closes on the 30th of November 2025. And also, look out for the release of two key publications. The results from the Scottish Agricultural Census 2025 was released on the 30th of October. And on the 11th of December 2025, the cereal and oilseed rape harvest final estimates will be released. Moving on to arable. Improving yields but mixed quality across Scotland. On the 16th of October, the Scottish Government released its initial estimates of area, yield and production for the 2025 harvest, covering winter and spring barley, wheat, oats and oilseed rape. Final figures will be published in December based on a larger sample of farms, but early indications suggest an overall improvement in yields compared with the previous year. Spring barley production is forecast at around 1.65 million tonnes, close to the 5-year average, but 1% below 2024 due to a slightly smaller area sown. Despite dry conditions, yields have held up reasonably well, although high rejection rates for malting quality mean a greater proportion is expected to go into the feed markets. Winter barley production is expected to reach 381,000 tonnes, a 16% increase compared with 2024, driven primarily by a 15% rise in yield. Predicted yields of around 8.8 tonnes per hectare would mark a record high for this crop. Wheat production is also expected to increase significantly to just over 1 million tonnes, a rise of 23% on last year. This improvement reflects both a 12% gain in yield and a 10% expansion in area sown, although performance continues to vary between different soil types. For oats, demand remains limited at this early stage, but small yield increases combined with a 7% larger area could lift production above the 5-year average. Oilseed rape production is forecast to rise by 15% to 152,000 tonnes, despite an 11% fall in area, suggesting strong yield recovery after several difficult seasons. By way of contrast, England's 2025 harvest has been confirmed as the second worst on record, with yields far below expectations following one of the warmest springs and driest early summers in more than a century. 3 of the 5 poorest harvests have now occurred within the last decade. According to the DEFRA report, wheat production reached 10.6 million tonnes, a 4.9% rise on 2024, but only due to an 8.8% increase in the planted area. Barley production dropped 14% to 4.2 million tonnes, driven by a 23% fall in spring barley and a smaller 2.2% decline in winter barley. Oat output also slipped 2.3% despite more land being used as yields fell by 11%. In contrast, oilseed rape provided a rare positive, with yields up 29% on 2024 and 17% above the 5-year average. There are two key factors influencing the industry at the moment: global oversupply and policy uncertainty. Globally, the grain market remains well supplied, but several key uncertainties are shaping sentiment. The temporary shutdown of the USDA has limited market visibility, while attention focuses on the outcome of the ongoing US-China trade discussions and the potential impact of La Niña conditions in the Southern Hemisphere. La Niña is a climate pattern that can last between 1 and 3 years and can significantly influence weather patterns globally. A successful trade agreement between Washington and Beijing would likely strengthen both the dollar and agricultural commodity prices, whereas any breakdown in talks would have the opposite effect, pressurising oilseed and grain values lower. In the United Kingdom, the feed wheat futures November 2025 contract closed at a new contracted low of £159 per tonne on the 24th of October, down £5 per tonne from the beginning of the month's value. The wheat basis remains unusually strong, however, standing at around £7 to £10 per tonne above normal levels. This strength reflects several interacting factors, including low opening stocks, a smaller national harvest, slower import flows, and a general reluctance amongst farmers to sell. With limited availability, feed compounders and millers have been forced to increase bids to attract tonnage, illustrating how local market tightness contracts sharply with global abundance. Diverging crop fortunes, malting barley and oats under pressure. The oats and malting barley sectors are both struggling with weak consumption and heavy supply. Domestic oat markets are oversupplied and lack viable export outlets. Meanwhile, malting barley faces a global downturn as brewers and distillers continue to draw down on existing stocks. Falling beer consumption, large whisky inventories, expanding Chinese malt exports, and the impact of US tariffs have combined to reduce demand sharply. Prices for malting barley have fallen considerably, a situation that's economically unsustainable, and there are indications that growers are switching away from the crop. Some early 2026 demand remains at or above £170 per tonne. European wheat is currently the most competitively priced globally. Nevertheless, the broader outlook is dominated by heavy supply. All major exporters except Ukraine are forecasting higher wheat production for 2025. Argentina expects a harvest of 22 million tonnes compared with 18.5 million tonnes last year. Australia could produce up to 34.5 million tonnes. Canada anticipates 36.6 million tonnes. Russia's crop is expected to increase by 5 million tonnes to around 88 million tonnes, and the European Union's output is set to rise by more than 22 million tonnes. Collectively, this represents an increase of over 30 million tonnes of global supply, while demand is expected to grow only by 5 million tonnes. This imbalance is likely to prevent any sustained recovery in international prices. Structural strain in Russia. Russia's grain industry is undergoing a deep structural crisis. Despite large production figures, more than 35,000 farmers have gone bankrupt over the past 5 years due to the burden of export duties, quotas, and shrinking margins. Initially introduced as a temporary stabilising measure during the pandemic, export duties have remained in place and now provide an important source of revenue for the Russian state. In 2024, these duties generated an income equivalent to £1.78 billion. While these measures have supported government finances, they have undermined the profitability of grain producers. Spring wheat harvested in 2025 is the lowest level in a decade, with growers stating they will switch to more profitable oilseed rape crops for 2026. This contraction threatens the government's long-term plan to raise annual grain production to 170 million tonnes and exports to 80 million tonnes by 2030. The Russian case highlights how short-term fiscal policy can conceal underlying weakness within the agricultural sector. And finally, Grain prices reporting for November 2025 are as follows. Wheat £178 per tonne, feed spring barley £120 per tonne, malting barley £170 per tonne, milling oats £158 per tonne, and oilseed rape at £403 per tonne. Let's take a look at the latest from the beef sector. Festive demand. We are now in the last quarter of the year, with only 3 to 4 weeks left of the Christmas supermarket orders as processors plan their Christmas kill schedules. Prime cattle prices have held firm throughout September and the first half of October, despite a seasonal lift in weekly slaughter, pointing to resilient demand. While prices sit around 9% below their spring peak, they remain at around 25% higher than this time last year, supported by lower production in 2025. For the week ending the 18th of October, Scottish steer prices were up 7 pence per kilo on the previous month, sitting at 650 pence per kilo deadweight for R4L grades, with Angus sired cattle at 665 pence per kilo deadweight. The question many are now asking is what is going to drive the Christmas demand? Cattle supplies, consumer demand, or carcass weights? While numbers on farm in July pointed towards a continuing tight supply throughout the remainder of 2025, lower slaughterings during the summer adds uncertainty as availability may not prove to be as tight as previously expected. In Scotland, prime cattle throughput remained below 2024 levels in September, and the latest slaughter figures indicate cattle throughputs have remained low in October. It is anticipated that prime cattle prices will rise in the coming weeks in preparation for increasing prime cattle requirements for the festive period. A lift in the finished price will be an encouraging sign for producers during a time of limited margins. However, reports suggest that processors are trying not to increase prices too quickly, as many are concerned over consumer demand. And in looking at limited consumer demand in more detail, increased farm gate prices in 2025 have led to supermarkets increasing beef prices, which is impacting on consumer spending and demand. Red meat price inflation in Scotland has accelerated in 2025, reaching 13.7% in September, driven primarily by the beef sector. Increased sales of pork were expected and not uncommon throughout October, also known as Porktober, as butchers and retailers pushed pork sales, with chops, mince and steak all recording increased sales. What is interesting is that in the 12 weeks to the 7th of September, spending on pork increased by 1.3%, and with volumes up 2.2%. Some of this growth reflects shoppers switching from beef to pork as beef prices continue to surge, making pork a more affordable alternative. Fears are now growing that beef imports are undermining UK producers. Worryingly, increased levels of imported Australian beef is now appearing on shelves as supermarkets extend ranges of beef, including rump and sirloin steaks labelled Australia made. They are reportedly 5 to 10% cheaper than UK beef. Reports also suggest that Uruguayan beef will soon be appearing on supermarket shelves. Price rewards. Producers are finally being rewarded for their hard work and the input costs associated with suckler cows. Weaned calves have averaged over £5 per kilo this autumn, with many producers receiving between £400 and £600 per head more than last year. To put this into perspective, a pen of 17 Charlie Cross heifers at the annual Skye sale of weaned calves, averaging 248 kilos live weight, made £1,380 per head, equating to 556 pence per kilo. With weaned 6-month-old calves realising up to £1,500, with the strongest of beef types commanding higher prices, several markets are commenting that buyers are looking instead to buy dairy beef cross calves. In previous years, these calves were selling for £300 a head. Now these calves are making £700 to £800 per head, the majority being sired by Angus and British Blue bulls, which British Blue sired calves at a premium. Strong trade for stores. Demand for store cattle continues to be strong, with current store prices squeezing finishing margins. Aberdeen and Northern Marts and Thainston recently reported that store cattle sold throughout September had increased by 45% on the year, grossing more than £600 per head compared with 2024. Heavier stores and 12 months old plus cattle continue to average around 400 to 420 pence per kilo. Looking forward, it is unlikely that store cattle prices will fall, with barley and feed prices being less and cattle numbers short. Let's take a look at the cull cow trade. Despite a seasonal uplift in slaughter, cow prices remain stable, highlighting the demand for manufactured beef. Prime beef is nearly £1 per kilo dearer, making cow beef very attractive to retailers. Cull cow prices remain steady despite greater numbers coming forward. GB slaughter levels were 11% higher on the previous week for the week ending the 18th of November 2025, approximately 6% below the spring peak, but 35 to 40% higher than last year, signalling a stronger market for cow beef than for prime beef. HDB recently revealed that 46% of beef sold is currently destined to be a burger. In the short term, it is anticipated that cull cow prices will remain consistent. And our beef article concludes with an overview of breeding cattle. The strong calf trade is a real incentive for breeders. However, many feel that these price increases have come too late for many herds, with many suckler cows having been culled. However, cow kill data at Scottish abattoirs points to a slowdown in herd contraction in the second half of the year. Figures from QMS show that in July 2025, there were 381,700 beef sired females aged 30 months and over on Scottish holdings, a 2.2% decline from a year earlier, representing a slowdown in the rate of decline, the lowest since January 2024. While Scotland's breeding herd continues to contract, albeit at a lower rate, the decline in suckler herds in England and Wales has continued to outpace the decline in Scotland, meaning that demand for Scottish suckler-bred calves is likely to remain high. Breeding cattle at sales have been extremely strong, with markets commenting on the demand for autumn calving cows, with buoyant prices paid for autumn calving heifers surpassing all expectations. The recent autumn sterling bull sales, with a total of 222 bulls sold, saw all breeding averages rise, with commercial buyers driving demand, investing in top quality genetics, no doubt on the back of strong wean calf prices. Simmental and Limousin breeds saw sale averages increase by £3,636 and £3,026 respectively on last year's sales prices. Charlie bulls met a 95% clearance rate, with over 20 bulls achieving five-figure prices.
If you're enjoying listening to business and policy news, why not try one of the other Farm Advisory Service podcasts? In the latest episode of Natural Capital, Harry and Alex reflect on their time at Scotland's first nature-friendly farming summit. The summit addressed how profitability and biodiversity can go hand in hand. The episode also looks at the future of funding, how current and new payment systems can reward environmental outcomes, and they discuss some of the key messages and announcements made on the day.
Moving on to sheep. October Trade Roundup. The volume of prime lambs coming forward for slaughter rose in October, with slaughter figures for the week ending the 18th of October to be 3% higher than last year. The price is reflecting the increased volume of lambs coming forward, with prices decreasing slightly each week. While September ended with an SQQ of 682.5 pence per kilo, in the latest week reported, the week ending the 25th of October, shows the SQQ at 661 pence per kilo, 0.42 pence per kilo ahead of the same week last year. Moving on to the cull trade. The premium has remained throughout the year due to a shortage of supply. For the week ending the 18th of October, the average Scottish cull ewe stood at £103.11 per head, while the same week last year the average was £17.85, less at £85.26 per head. Typical trends show cull new prices expected to rise to the end of the year as supply shortens, and we could see some further premiums in this area as we head towards Christmas. European lamb export and import. Data is available for European lamb slaughterings from January through to July this year. This shows the extent of the production decreases in Europe. Looking at 4 different countries, slaughterings are down by the following amounts: Spain 2.3%, Romania 7.3%, Greece 4.8%, and France 7.7%. Imports of sheep meat into Europe from January to July 2025 have increased by 20% on the year. This shows an increase of 16,200 tonnes to 99,400 tonnes. Of this total, the UK has supplied 47%, which equates to 46,600 tonnes, while New Zealand has supplied 46%, equating to an increase on the year of 19% from the UK and 16% from New Zealand. When we look at exports from Europe, these have increased on the year by 7%. Surprising given the decrease in production. The greatest volume has been exported to Algeria, who have a large demand for sheep meat throughout religious festivals and are suffering from low production from a lack of rainfall and extremely high temperatures. While Europe have routed more lamb to Algeria, the UK exports have decreased by 4%, largely due to less being available and a low domestic demand in the UK. Turning our attention to UK lamb demand. Over the last number of years, less people are eating out and are instead choosing to eat at home more, due to affordability. It has been shown that the value and purchases of meat in the shopper's cart is to be increasing with this trend. Chicken remains the most popular and versatile meat. However, there are opportunities for lamb in product diversification. Shoppers show Asian, Indian and Mexican cooking increasing, and with this brings the use of chicken, beef and lamb. Shoppers are seeking an experience with their meals and are looking for different and innovative dishes that are quick and easy to cook. Diversification of the type of steak being bought is becoming apparent, with, in the last 12 weeks, lamb steaks increasing in volume by 25.1%. This is the highest price lamb cut at an average of £17.31 per kilo. While burgers remain one of the cheapest cuts at £8.44 per kilo, these show a 0.8% reduction in volume over the last 12 weeks. However, the price per kilo has risen 11.7% on the year. In the last 12 weeks, lamb has shown a decrease in volume sales of 16.7% or 2,990 tonnes, begging the question, is there a way as an industry that we can tap into food trends such as experience world cuisine brilliantly? And finally, global prices. There has not been much improvement in world lamb prices over the past month. The gap between the Southern Hemisphere and the EU remains large. If we look at the week ending, the 11th of October 2025, prices ranged from €5.30 in New Zealand to €7.66 in Great Britain and reached €9.40 in Spain. New season lamb is starting to increase in volume in Australia. With the additional supply, their price will no doubt see fluctuations to the end of the year. Our final industry update looks at milk. And this is also, sadly, the final dairy article written by our specialist dairy consultant, Dr. Lorna McPherson, who is moving on to pastures new. Starting with milk production data. Globally, milk output from the key exporting regions is increasing and outstripping demand, which is negatively impacting on markets and resulting in some dramatic milk price cuts. Domestic milk production is not helping, with rain over the last couple of months benefiting grazing herds, and UK production having increased by around 6.2% in September compared to the same month in 2024. Daily GB production is currently 35.55 million litres for the week ending the 18th of October, which is 0.9% more than the previous week and 7.3% more than in the same week in 2024. an extra 2.43 million litres daily. AHDB have recently updated their forecast for the 2025-2026 milk year with an estimated production of 12.89 billion litres. If realised, this would be a record high and 3.6% more than the 2024-2025 milk year. September's GB milk volume was estimated at 1,026 million litres, 57 million litres more than the previous September, up 5.9%. For the UK, September's production was 1,239 million litres, which is 1.5% less than the previous month, but 7.4% more than September 2024. Farmgate prices. The DEFRA Farmgate milk price for September was 45.54 pence per litre, down 1.4 pence per litre from the August price and 7% more than a year ago. Milk price drops are starting to come in thick and fast, with a 1.25% drop for Muller Direct Supplies and a 1 pence drop in the First Milk suppliers from the 1st of November. Bigger price drops have been announced south of the border. The biggest ones so far are an 8 pence per litre drop from Parkham Dairies in Devon to 35.5 pence per litre, and Meadow Foods and Freshways dropping 6 pence per litre in response to continued high milk volumes, with a November price of 36 pence per litre, and with Lactalis and the Fresh Milk Company dropping their price for November by 5 pence per litre. Looking at Scottish Farmgate prices, the following prices are in pence per litre for the standard litre. First Milk, November 42.85. Muller Direct, November 41.5. Graham's, November 42 pence. Arla Farmers, November 41.74. And Lactalis Fresh Milk Company, November 37.13. Dairy commodities and market indicators. The markets are well and truly reacting now to higher milk volumes, both domestically and globally. The average UK wholesale price for cream for October dropped a massive 23% from the previous month. Butter, mild cheddar and skimmed milk powder are also back 16%, 9% and 5% respectively. Markets are out of kilter with oversupply of products and weak demand. EU production has been ramping up, especially in France and Germany, with their butter stocks building. There is increasing competitiveness in the global cheese market, and while sellers are reluctant to drop prices too much, with cheese having been made with expensive milk, they are keen to clear the build-up of stocks by the end of the year. In addition to which, there have been more dairy imports from the US and New Zealand on the back of free trade deals, and their more competitively priced products compared to the EU, especially for butter and cheese. Not surprisingly, the market indicators moved down from last month. The actual milk price equivalent down 5.4 pence per litre, and milk for cheese value equivalent down 3.83 pence per litre. The milk market value indicator also continued its downward trajectory, dropping significantly by 4.14 pence per litre to 34.89 pence per litre for September. A worrying trend, given that this indicator is typically strongly correlated to movements in the Farmgate milk price in 3 months' time. The global dairy trade auction had its 5th consecutive drop of 1.4% at the latest auction on the 21st of October. The average price across all products fell to $3,881 per tonne. The biggest fall was in mozzarella, down 5.3% to $3,230 per tonne, and whole milk powder down 2.4% to $3,610 per tonne. And now for something a bit different and sometimes overlooked. How clean is your water? Often referred to as a forgotten nutrient, water availability and its cleanliness has a huge impact on both milk production and cow health. There are new approaches available in the market for the treatment of both drinking water and wastewater for livestock, including chlorine dioxide, ozone, and nanobubble technology. These treatments are effective in killing pathogens and removing slimy biofilms, which can be hard to penetrate with some biocides and kill the bacteria within them. Reported benefits include improved growth rates in young stock, higher milk production, and healthier animals. In addition, some of these technologies offer a chemical-free way to efficiently clean the milking plant. And our milk update concludes with a look at the cost of production and a price outlook. With feed prices still relatively low, higher levels of concentrate feeding will likely continue to help make up for forage shortages in some areas, and therefore high milk production is likely to be maintained. Any drop in domestic production is more likely to come from increased culling or exits from dairying. Milk prices are predicted to be around 40 pence or less by the end of 2025 and dropping further heading into 2026, well below the cost of production. The Dairy Group forecasts the cost of production for 2025-2026 to be 49.2 pence per litre, up from the 2024-2025 figure of 48.5 pence per litre, on the back of higher feed costs and inflation, which mean very challenging times ahead.
Hi, my name is Lorna McPherson, and I'm a consultant specialising in dairy with SAC Consulting. My article looks at embracing new technology to help dairy businesses in terms of herd health, cow management, and overall profitability. With reliable, experienced labour on dairy farms costly and difficult to find, what is the alternative? Well, there are many tasks in dairy farming that require a high level of stockmanship and cannot be replaced by technology. But there are technologies available that can offer huge savings in labour, as well as improved efficiency, animal health and welfare, and productivity. However, how do you know if the level of investment necessary can be justified for your business? Although we have all admired or dreamed of shiny new pieces of kit, to make sure your investment will benefit productivity and profitability on your farm, the following factors should be considered. Work out the cost benefit and whether the technology is aligned with your performance goals and operational needs. It is worth also calculating the break-even point and the length of time it takes for the improved returns to cover the initial and ongoing costs, helping to clarify whether the investment is viable. Don't forget to include training and maintenance costs as well. What is the return on investment, taking into account all related costs and likely returns? Also, how will the investment affect cash flow, and how will that impact on the financial stability of the business? This is an important consideration and should be based on market returns. When is the right time to invest? Are there any risks with the technology, including market changes, and are there steps you can take to mitigate them? Is the technology scalable and flexible to grow with the farm's future goals and to weather potential changes that may come within the industry? How good is the backup? Technical support and access to local support may be essential depending on the technology. Also important is user-friendliness and whether the technology can link to existing farm management software if relevant. Getting buy-in from all those involved in using the technology, not just family members and employees, but consultants and vets, to make sure it meets the needs of the farm. And finally, it is important to investigate funding options and government grants, and whether there are any implications on tax and tax benefits. The cost of the technology may be tax deductible and could reduce your taxable income in the short term. However, if the technology improves efficiency and results in higher income, you may in the long run end up paying more tax. Where can technology benefit your business? Firstly, in labour savings. With less labour around, things like robot feed and slurry pushers and robotic milking systems, which now account for a high percentage of new milking installations, are a no-brainer from a labour-saving and work-life balance perspective. However, there is more to think about than just how to afford them. Unless you are building a new dairy complex, it is likely you will have to make modifications to your existing infrastructure, which comes at an added cost. Also good to know is that feed and slurry robots can escape, so plan ahead so that you don't waste precious time trying to track them down. There are also health benefits. While labour savings can be significant, it is important to take into consideration all the benefits when investing in technology and the returns from improved herd health. For example, slurry robots can contribute towards lower lameness with less digital dermatitis on the back of cleaner feet, and lower cell counts and lower levels of mastitis compared to automatic scrapers or manual scraping of passageways. One vet suggested to me that clinical cases of mastitis can drop in the region of 10 to 15% per year when moving from automatic scrapers to a slurry robot system. The cost of mastitis varies greatly, but from lower yields, veterinary costs, labour and loss of milk quality bonuses, costs can stack up to around £300 per case, or more if it results in culling or death. And so 10 less cases per year per 100 cows could amount to a saving of £3,000. The same could be said for lower levels of lameness with a slurry robot, with lame cows being a huge drain on the profitability of the business. There is also less risk of injury, and given the value of stock, having less culls is a good financial saving. Some technologies can also help with managing climate change. Hot weather can have a devastating impact on dairy herds, reducing fertility and productivity. There are various relatively low-cost sensors available that monitor temperature and humidity in livestock sheds. Controlling the environment with fans, curtains, or even just manually opening and closing doors based on monitoring environmental conditions can reap benefits and contribute to lower disease levels, less antibiotic use, and potentially lower mortality rates. It is not just cows that benefit from a monitored environment. A new sensor developed through a UK-wide innovation programme led by SRUC is helping dairy farmers prevent pneumonia in calves by monitoring pen-level conditions before illness can take hold. Pneumonia is one of the most significant disease challenges in the dairy industry, often causing long-term lung damage and reducing lifetime productivity. Created by Cumbria-based Isaac Orr and Klein Albertelli, Pneumonitor, the in-pen device collects real-time data on the environmental conditions calves experience. It measures temperature, humidity, pressure, wind gusts, and relative volatile organic compounds. The Pneumonitor sensor sits at calf height within the pen, where conditions differ significantly, even 1 metre away. Pneumonitor sends targeted alerts to smartphones when environmental conditions become risky, allowing preventative action to be taken before calves show symptoms. For more information on this, see the link in the show notes. Dairy technology is becoming part of the management team. Many technologies are commonplace now on dairy farms, especially wearable devices like smart collars and ear tags for fertility management and health monitoring. These now play a crucial role in managing dairy units by providing real-time data, automating processes, and improving communication. The amount of data generated by some of these technologies is vitally important to improve herd management and cow health. Through funding from the Digital Dairy Chain, researchers at SRUC's Dairy Research Centre at Dumfries have developed FarmTwin, a world's first open-source digital twin platform designed specifically to transform dairy farming. A digital twin is a virtual representation of the entire farm system, from individual animals through to infrastructure, which is created using real-time data from sensors, telemetry, and other digital tools. One of the standout features of FarmTwin is its ability to integrate multiple streams of data from different vendors and visualize data through intuitive dashboards, giving farmers an at-a-glance view of their entire operation. The platform also supports predictive analytics, allowing early detection of health issues or productivity drops before they escalate. The system can combine milk yield trends with live health data to detect early signs of illness, triggering alerts, or automated responses. For example, if an animal is flagged as potentially unwell, the system can trigger a shedding gate to isolate the cow, while notifying the farmer and providing context for the action. By replicating the physical environment in a digital space, FarmTwin enables farmers to monitor operations in real time, make data-driven decisions, and to optimize the use of resources. For more information, please see the FarmTwin and Digital Dairy Chain links in the show notes. Going forward, there is no doubt that technology will continue to evolve and further increase automation in the dairy industry. Embracing new technologies will help to improve profitability and ensure the sustainability of dairy farming in the face of future environmental and regulatory challenges.
Further articles of note section. Business and Policy News has links in the show notes to allow you to dig deeper into further articles of note. This month, we have 7 top picks. At number 1, Tech Savvy Dairy Farming, with Lorna McPherson's specialist article highlighting what is happening in the world of new technology for dairy farms. The Farm Advisory Service website has further information and videos on precision solutions for calf health and welfare, building ventilation and lighting, assessing cow cleanliness, and our robots for me. Links to the relevant podcasts, videos, and publications have been included in the show notes. Our second pick looks at slatted flooring for sheep. Following on from Kirsten Williams' monthly update on all things ovine, as we head into winter, the Farm Advisory Service website has a new article highlighting the potential benefits of converting general purpose style sheds into slatted accommodation for sheep in terms of improving flock efficiency and welfare, while also reducing bedding costs. In at number 3, we have a publication and a video that covers greening changes, covering what you need to know. With Christine Beaton's policy article highlighting the changes to ecological focus area requirements going forward, the Farm Advisory Service website has further information and a video on the new regulations. Our fourth special pick is a Cropcast podcast, with Mark Bowser-Gibbs' arable article highlighting how the 2025 harvest has shaped up for Scotland and England amidst a backdrop of global oversupply, diverging crop fortunes and political uncertainties. In the latest Cropcast podcast, George Chalmers is joined by SEC Senior Consultant and Chartered Accountant Andrew Coulter to discuss arable farm finances, particularly cash flow challenges, investment and capital allowances for arable farms. In at number 5 this month, make it a date to remember with Rural Roundup, with Christine Beaton's policy article highlighting upcoming changes to the Scottish Suckler Beef Support Scheme from the 31st of December. The latest Farm Advisory Service Rural Roundup podcast hosts George Chalmers and Mary Jane Laurie talk about upcoming deadlines including suckler beef support, EFA greening cover, and preparing for sustainable farming. Our sixth pick is an episode of Fast TV. Keep calm and moo on. Following on from Lorna McPherson's specialist article, which highlights the use of new dairy technology available to monitor stock health, and her dairy article, which discusses the importance of water in overall stock welfare. In this episode of Fast TV, we meet the founders of Herd Advance and hear about their Stockman system, a real-time precision performance and health monitoring system for cattle, with integrated remote drafting and selection, which can also track the water use and temperature of individual animals. Plus, we hear from vet Tim Geraghty on how this new technology can reduce stress in cattle handling and ultimately improve cattle health and efficiency. And finally, we highlight an episode of Fast TV where the theme is making succession a success. With business and succession planning an important part of running an agricultural business, in this episode of Fast TV, we join Linda Tinson and Lorna Mackay, agricultural and rural business solicitors, with Bernice Paul, where they give us some practical considerations for your farming business and key things to consider as you approach your own solicitor for one-to-one advice. From all the Business and Policy team, thank you very much for listening to this audio edition of Business and Policy News. Remember to like Business and Policy News to get notified of future episodes of this monthly podcast. Our next edition is due out on the 7th of December. A written version of this newsletter is available on the FAD's website. To receive a copy direct each month, Search for FAS newsletters and subscribe to Business and Policy. This newsletter was edited by me, Christine Beaton, and included articles written by Christine Beaton, Mark Bowser-Gibbs, Sarah Balfour, Kirsten Williams and Lorna McPherson. This podcast is produced in association with the Scottish Government and was presented by me, Christine Beaton, produced by Heather Stewart, edited by Cameron Waugh, with executive producers Kirsten Blackwood and Kerry Hammond.